Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast in 10 minutes or less. At least we try. Definitely no more than 15 minutes. Today we are going to talk about what people wear and don't wear. What, when, and where people wear on their heads is a complicated topic, not only in Christianity, but also in Judaism. And it just doesn't concern what women wear either. Generally, the first thought for religious headwear is the hijab, often worn by Muslim women. The hijab and other garments are definitely related to our discussion today, but a little bit outside of our 10 minutes. So we'll kind of focus and think more about how Christianity developed their headwear. Now, if you think a bit more after the hijab, you might think of the Jewish kippah or yarmulke. Church hats worn by women in certain Christian traditions, the mitre or tiara worn by popes. You will definitely see the relationship in practice and tradition between all these types of headwear by the time we're done today. First, let's talk about what these head coverings are supposed to be covering up. What's your guess? That's right, hair. What's up with hair? Hair was a gigantic deal in the ancient world for people of all ages, men and women, and for all levels of society. Hair had more layers of meaning than a shattered bob. Hair had religious importance in society, different haircuts at different times of life. It was common for women to change their hairstyle or adopt wearing hair coverings after marriage. Now, we could go round and round for hours with all of the context and background of different customs and beliefs on hair and hair coverings around the ancient world, but we just don't have time for that. So let's focus in on head coverings in Judaism and the Christian context. The Old Testament's full of references to hair covering. In the Garden of Eden, not much of anything was covered, but after Adam and Eve got booted from the garden, more was covered. Traditionally in Mediterranean societies, a woman's hair was considered very sensual and up there with other sensual bits. By that logic, hair should be covered just as any other private area should be covered. It was really the ancient Mediterraneans and the Jewish culture's version of cultural propriety. A woman in the ancient Near East wouldn't go out in a miniskirt just as she wouldn't go out without her hair covered. Girls would not be obliged to follow this, but would adopt hair coverings either when they were married or reached puberty. In the ancient world, those two events occurred around the same time. Look at the earliest iconography of the Virgin Mary. She was probably betrothed to Joseph when she was in the neighborhood of 12 or 13. There's a possible depiction of the Virgin Mary at Dura Europos, the house church from the 250s CE. It could also be the woman in the well from that biblical story. See our episode on the Dura Europos house church in the show notes for more detail on that. Now, if that early iconography of the Virgin Mary actually was the Annunciation, the woman was not wearing a head covering, even though Mary was betrothed to Joseph at the Annunciation. I mean, does this mean something? Is it just an artistic representation? Does it mean that Mary wasn't betrothed at that point? There's a lot of questions. Next, an icon or a piece of religious art of Mary with the baby Jesus was found in the Roman catacombs from about a century later. Mary is possibly wearing a veil there. Going forward in both Jewish and Christian tradition, women continue to wear head coverings. Now there's some controversy here, and we'll go to Paul's letter of the Corinthians. Paul addressed many controversies of the church in Corinth. This church, or maybe more accurately, Jesus Club, see Gary Stevens' History of the Bible podcast for more on this, had many controversies and problems. It was really the Greco-Roman traditions bashing into ancient Jewish traditions. The women there were not covering their heads in church, and Paul said they should be. He also said men should not cover their head in prayer. The covering of a hair for women became set at that point in tradition, even though traditions would change in certain aspects and in certain places as time progressed. Men and hair coverings is something we don't much think about. It's often said that women only wearing head coverings in church is misogynist or at the very least unfair. But why is it that women should cover their heads but not men? Jewish custom compared to Christian custom helps figure this out. Hair was seen as a really important thing for men too in ancient Near Eastern Greco-Roman culture. It was seen as a sign of virility and power, and hairstyles varied. Old temple references to head coverings include that the high priest and other temple officials would have their head covered. Today, many Jews wear a head covering called the kippah or yarmulke for prayer and daily life. Other Jews do not, and everything in between. And there's really a lot of historical context to this. The tradition of wearing the kippah or head covering for men during prayer goes back to about the 2nd century CE. So what does that mean? Was there a Jewish tradition to wear a head covering for men during the prayer in the Second Temple period? That's a good question. Now, was Paul breaking that tradition to make things more in line with the Romans and the Greeks that he was trying to spread his message to? Or was this some essentially modified version of Second Temple Jewish faith? Was Paul solidifying a widely held tradition in regards to both men and women in their hair coverings? One way or another, we see a divergence between a Jewish and Christian practice. Now, we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg on this one. There are any number of topics we can follow from this overview: papal tiaras, mitres, women's veils, the changes that have come and gone with women's hairstyles and hair coverings, and much, much more, and hopefully we'll get to them all. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Make sure you hit the like this video, subscribe, hit the bell so you get more episodes just like this. And don't forget, we are also on patreon.com, and thank you so much to all the Patreons who really do a lot to help make this happen. I will talk to you next time.